the the genre of Asian American media is very young. We were just talking about this, the three of us, yesterday, in planning for this. And there's a writer I really like, a poet and writer. Her name is Jenny Zhang. And she did an interview just this week that came out. And she talked about how because the canon for Asian American literature and media is still not really set, everything that we are writing, and her, as a writer, is actually in the process of creating it. As we mentioned, this show, Fresh Off the Boat, aired within the last few years. It's the only second show to ever existed to have shown an Asian American family, the first one featuring Margaret Cho. Um, like the even the fact that it's 2016, like it's taken a really long time. We think about like the Cosby Show as being like that breaking point for like African American families and narratives, and like here we are. It's taken a long time. We're still working on it. There's not a lot that exists. Like I mentioned, Sue Chen Ra couldn't be here, but he said in his like presentation on Lamentations yesterday, that like with the last 10 books you've read, how many of them were written by people of color or women? Right? If your books are all being written by white men, you maybe need to like diversify your reading list. In the same way, what are the last 10 shows you watched on TV? What are the last 10 films you saw? How many of them featured the narrative of an Asian American person, and that they weren't just like a minority sidekick, they weren't just exist to make sure that the lead character doesn't look racist, like. So that's the reason why I made this film, is because narratives like this, they don't exist in a lot, to be honest. Have you guys felt that in your own personal experience, like the lack of narratives, Asian American narratives in particular?
Yeah, for those who came in just now, I'm not Sung Chan Ra, as SueAnn hinted to. He couldn't be with us, but I'm Kenji Kuramitsu, again, hi. Some of the narratives that I feel like are told about Asian Americans are maybe you've seen that great TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie of The Danger of a Single Story. I think Asian American communities can, basically, if you haven't, she's talking about like, don't just take a people and insist they have one story and that's all they are. If Asian Americans get a story and get a hearing and representation in theology, right, in classrooms, in media, at events like Wild Goose, if we get a story, it's one story. It's narrowed to one thing, and it doesn't really reveal the complexity of what it is to be Asian American, of belonging to different generational cohorts, right? By that I mean I'm fifth generation Asian American. First since 1.5, meaning like, and that kind of means like my great-great-grandparents came to Hawaii and then to the US, right? That's a very different experience from newer Asian immigrants today, although we've faced some of the same similar, like, where are you really from kind of questions, and are racialized in similar ways. The single story around Asian Americans doesn't really point to the fact that there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ethnic and cultural groups, and they often hate each other. In what we call Asia, but in the West, right, a lot of times the assumption is just Asian means one thing, you look like one thing, and there's that image that crops into mind. So I guess particularly for me, as someone who's trying to do theology, the dearth of Asian American representation means that like we don't have the luxury of hating each other. And I mean that jokingly, like we get along a lot, but if we didn't, there's no other Asian Americans here. Right, so we have to like be friends, sort of, which is like, it's kind of the bind we're in. Yeah, I will like you no matter who you are, essentially.
I think one thing that's important to me is like how telling my own story is a part of my own healing, and I think part of what you're saying about writing a new canon for Asian American literature, it's like a part of our collective healing. As kind of
not even new canon, just a canon.
A canon. The first canon of Asian American experience. That's ridiculous. Yeah. And what it has meant for me is that I grew up without any kind of like narrative to map my own experience onto, and so about Asian Americanness, and so all I had was like white culture, or like Chinese culture, and it felt very clear to me that I no longer fit into the Chinese culture, that story, and actually that's really tragic to me. There's like a lot of sadness and the brokenness between like my current story and the story of my family and the story of my people. I just like don't even know most of that story. And so what I've mapped onto is like white narrative, you know, white culture.
I definitely experienced that too.
Yeah, and I mean, I've done that to survive. You know, I had to do that to not be bullied as a child. Like, I have to make sure that I can speak well, I can write well, I know all the cultural references, and you know, it served me. You know, it served me really well. And now I think what I know is that what that did is it stripped me of my ability to like know my own story, and to have a story that I could resonate with more authentically.